Welcome back to the channel. This is Tartarian Explorer here. Today I want to talk about the world's fairs and explore the fascinating history that we've not been told about them. The first thing I want to do is show you a clip that will get you super inspired. It's 2 minutes long. It's on Telegram. Let's share the screen here.
Would take today, if you had a place with no electricity and no way to pipe it in, the generators that would have to be built.
For example, there's a building that went up for the Barcelona Exposition in 1888. It was claimed to be the fastest built building in the world. 5,000 square meters, capacity for 2,000 guests, 600 rooms, 30 apartments, and it was supposed to be built in 53 days. This is supposed to be a time of horse and buggy.
So we're going to explore that building in a minute. We're not going to just take his word for it, but it turns out what he's saying is pretty accurate. We should always investigate.
The 2-year building times are actually impossible unless the two most likely theories would be either A, they had a technology that they're not supposed to have, and it really was built in that time frame. Even if they built them, they had to build them out of marble and stone in record time, or the buildings were already there. They'd been there for hundreds or thousands of years, fixed up, refurbished, repainted.
So the two theories, like he said, either the building was founded, not built by our civilization, our current civilization, around the turn of the century, so 1900, our ancestors, our bloodline, who goes back to a certain extent, found the buildings. The dates were when they found them, not when they built them. They had no idea how to build this kind of stuff. They just dug it out of mud. Some of them were buried in mud, and they dug it out. And the buildings could have been hundreds to thousands of years old. Nobody knows the date exactly because it was found at that date. Or the second theory is that the buildings were built with the technology that we don't understand, that we're not privy to, that was a lost technology that we're still uncovering, built by an advanced civilization that was of higher order than we are. We're all focused on money, and we're all focused on materialism, and they were focused on spirit, and they could do incredible things. So either way, fascinating history that we have not been told.
Hence the term whitewashed, which is the term that was used for the Chicago Exposition, which was paint all the buildings with this brand new spray paint that they had just developed to spray paint all the buildings in record time, so you couldn't tell if anything was old or anything was new.
How long did these things tend to stay open? When they built these things, supposedly over 2 years, which is the narrative, how long were they there for?
6 months.
6 months for the public to come.
And then what was amazing, for example, in St. Louis, 2 days after the fair ended, they brought in a demolition team from Chicago with explosives and blew the thing up. They actually used dynamite to blow it up, and they say threw it in landfills. Things like the World Fairs shows there was a time in our past, and even not that far in our past, where humans seem to be at a completely higher level. Human living and human knowledge were constructed into the buildings using cymatics, using sacred geometry. These fairs, they're so important to study because the history that we know right now as history was invented at the time these fairs were going on. One of their underlying nefarious purposes was to teach a historical narrative to the population that they were supposed to believe and agree with. And scarily, the world we're walking into today is in some way has its origins during the time of these fairs.
Question everything, friends. So good. Telegram's got like tons of great, there's a couple different channels on Telegram. You can go to Tartaria English Group. Another one is Tartarian History Channel. You can just scroll all day, and it's better information than YouTube sometimes and other places. It's just all available if you just scroll through. So. Okay, so let's take a closer look at that hotel in Barcelona that was built in 54 days, they say, or something like that. So we have the 1888 Barcelona Universal Exposition. The fair was hosted on the reconstructed 115-acre site of the city's main public park. Now, what they say about this fair is that a lot of the buildings were temporary, as we're told with all of them. But, for example, this arch was not temporary. So they're building like a mixed bag of buildings. And they're saying, and some of them are freaking grand like this. And the rest were made out of like staff and plaster and put up to be temporary. But they're still grand and, they still have the same architectural masterpiece, which doesn't make sense to me. I think they were all built like that, and it destroyed most of them. A few remained for some reason. So let's see that hotel. So tell me if you think this hotel, right in the comments, you think this hotel was built in 53 days and built and then destroyed within 1 year. That's what they say. Like a year later, it was destroyed after the fair. And it only took 53 days to build. And supposedly it was built out of material that was like cheap material, like staff and plaster. But I'm not getting that vibe from it. Here is the exhibition. So this whole area was built for the exhibition, and then all of it was a lot of the bones were taken down. But the fact that they built all this stuff just for this exhibition is what I'm questioning, because did they really build it in like a short period of time? Did they go through this whole terrain and make all that amendments to the land? I mean, this looks like a Tartarian golden age here. The people look relaxed. The people look relaxed, like they're either the past or the new ones. They're not worried about money, making money. There's leisure, fun. Here it is, the hotel, built in 53 days, as we're told, miraculously. I mean, does that make any sense at all? It looks to be really grand. Could be made out of fake, cheap materials, but I doubt it. So, there's the hotel at the bottom. And then here are some of the other buildings, which, by the way, are all destroyed right after the fair. Okay. So let me zoom out a little bit. That one over there. Ooh, that one down there. Wow. And this whole area is like a huge, massive layout. Seen that one already. Here we go. Barcelona Exposition Universal. Not Spanish writing, but illustration of this massive design. So all this was built for the fair and then destroyed right after. Built to be temporary. Even these little towers, which look to be made out of solid material. Oh. Yep. There's a Spanish word for it, but... Huh. Then again, this arch still stands and it's grand. So why the other stuff is not grand, it looks grand to me. It looks the same beautiful style, This is the Arc de Triomphe, kind of like this France one in France. Hotel International. Aerial view. Castle of the Three Dragons, Barcelona Exposition. So this building right here still stands today, but those fancy statues are all gone, and it's totally in a different um, backdrop. Okay, so there's another view of the Hotel International. Here's another view. Accept it. 53 days. Let's see the story on that. So, yeah, it stood 5 stories tall, occupied 5,000 square meters, so 54,000 square feet. The construction began in the middle of the month of December, and on the 14th of February, 1888, the building had been completed. In the middle of January, it was decided to work at night using 18 large electric lights, and the personal brigades were structured which in total were made up of 650 masons and laborers, 100 carpenters, and 40 plasterers. So they just went to town on this, huh? Here's a staircase inside. I mean, it's pretty extensive. I'm not buying it. I mean, just look at the quality of this arch that was built for the fair. All that expert craftsmanship to chisel out the angels and people, and the crowns and the griffins or whatever those lions are, and the placards and the little king's crowns. Jeez. Wow. Now I want to show you a quick clip from a really great YouTuber named Michelle Gibson. She does excellent work, and it's beyond my capacity to explain it. I wish I could explain it great, but she does such a good job. So we'll watch about a couple minutes of her, and I'll leave a link in the description.
Same lines, to which I will give you just a simple introduction. The Colonial and Indian Exhibition in London in 1886, the Piedmont Exposition in Atlanta in 1887, the Melbourne Centennial Exhibition in 1888, the Universal
So just notice the grand architecture, and all of these were destroyed. It's about 99% of them, of the buildings, were destroyed, and they're all supposedly made out of cheap fake materials like plaster and staff. Just think about it. Were these made out of that material? Just look at them carefully.
Exposition in Paris in 1889, the World's Columbian Exposition.
This one for sure, I don't think was made out of plaster, because, I mean, just look up this separately, the Chicago World's Fair, and just, who cares if it was made out of plaster? The fact that they built this in supposedly 2 years out of a swamp and then destroyed it all, it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Like, a red flag should be going off in your head everywhere at the thought of this, of how they tell it, what they say about it. It's incredibly like dumb what they tell us about it. You got to be really asleep to think what they say is true.
Exposition in Chicago in 1893. The California Midwinter Exposition of 1894 in San Francisco. The Central American Exposition in Guatemala City, Guatemala in 1897. The International Exposition in Hobart, Tasmania in 1894 and 1895. The Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta in 1895. The Tennessee Centennial and International Exposition in Nashville in 1897. The Trans-Mississippi and International Exposition in Omaha, Nebraska in 1898. The Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York in 1901. The Glasgow International Exposition in 1901. The South Carolina Interstate and West Indian Exposition in Charleston in 1901 and 1902. The Wolverhampton Exhibition in 1902 in Wolverhampton, England. The Hanoi Exhibition in Vietnam in 1902 and 1903. The Louisiana Purchase Exhibition in St. Louis, Missouri.
This one is really incredible. Watch my Intro to Tartaria video, and I post a lot of pictures of this one. And I'll post a link to this photos of this whole place. And it'll blow your mind. Like, the fact that this grand city was destroyed is a complete shame and completely not taught in public schools for some reason. Like, it's freaking incredible.
Missouri in 1904. The Lewis and Clark Exhibition in Portland, Oregon in 1905. The Jamestown Exposition in...
Oh my gosh. This is incredible. So the fact that they laid out, like, they didn't just build all these buildings. They actually built fountains and waterways. All these exhibitions had like little canals for people to float in on, little ships, and they had some of these were connected to the dirigibles, how they got around, and then in the electric trolleys everywhere. There's a lot of technology that we don't quite know about.
In Norfolk, Virginia in 1907. The Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition in Seattle in 1909. The Panama Pacific International...
This one looks like Star Wars, kind of.
Exposition in San Francisco in 1915. The Panama California Exposition in San Diego in 1915 and 1916. The Sesquicentennial International Exposition in Philadelphia in 1926. The Chicago World's Fair in 1933 and 1934. The California Pacific International Exposition in San Diego in 1935 and 1936. The Great Lakes Exposition in Cleveland in 1936 and 1937. The Texas Centennial International Exposition in Dallas in 1936 and 1937. The Golden Gate International Exposition in San Francisco in 1939 and 1940. And the New York World's Fair in 1939 and 1940. There were other world fairs and expositions held around the world after this, but I want to focus on the earlier ones for the purposes of this video.
So there was a lot more that she didn't even cover. Like, she only covered like a small fraction of how many World's Fairs there were. It's incredible. So now I want to talk about the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exhibition in Seattle, Washington in 1909. Now this building right here, as a background, that was supposedly a temporary structure built in like a year or two, along with over 100 other buildings and then destroyed right after. This one does not look temporary to me. Just looking at it, it looks pretty solid. It doesn't look like plaster and staff like they tell us. And this is a map of the fair. And it's incredible, like geometry. It's all laid out in a very specific pattern. Focus on the Arctic Circle in the middle, and then there's a big, huge, grand fountain with, and it's all purposely laid out. And as we're told, actually, I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to what they say. I'll read it directly from Wikipedia. Okay, so here is a authorized bird's eye view of the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition, Seattle, Washington, USA, 1909. Now, that is a pretty extensive layout there. I wish I could zoom in more, but I'll have some other shots I can zoom in on. Oh, there we go. Notice that one domed building with colonnades around the top dome and then the bottom too. There's some beautiful fountains. It's all laid out in perfect symmetry and geometry. Here is what we're told about this construction of it and how the origins of this fair. So this whole city, here's what we're told in Wikipedia. All right, design and construction. The Olmsted brothers of Brooklyn, Massachusetts were selected to plan the exhibition. So these guys are just some people that are credited with, like, Frederick Law Olmsted. He's credited for many parks, like Boston Park and New York and all these places. It's just a name to say that this guy built all this stuff. I mean, one guy can't build it all. I'm the architect. Like, no, you're not the architect. People actually, the labor of it, unless they had some crazy technology where a guy could just imagine it and it's built. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. John C. Olmsted visited Seattle. Okay, so this guy, John Olmsted, visited Seattle in October 1906 and saw the dominant form of Mount Rainier towards the southeast. He selected the mountain as the focus of the primary axis of the exhibition. So late 1906, this guy goes there and sees this mountain and says, hey, why don't we build this exhibition? And then, so that's 1906. And opening June 1st, 1909. So there's Mount Rainier. And then June 1st, 1909, is that 2 or 3 years later? It's all built out. By the way, oh, that's Berlin, by the way. That's a separate place, which is really cool. So, I mean, does that make any sense to you? Can they just build a whole freaking city in 3 years? This view of this shows the government building at the top of the Cascades. Christmas tree. This is extensive. Fresh plantings help to take the raw edge of the Court of Honor. I love how they call it the Court of Honor. This is a Tartarian structure. These are people that respect God and know beauty and know art, and they were probably breatharians. They didn't eat or sleep. How else do you build all this stuff? Okay, so here's, according to one Archives West, most of the buildings were constructed cheaply and easily of plaster and were razed immediately after the fair. Razed meaning destroyed. So that's what they're saying. They're saying nationally known landscape, okay, blah, blah, blah. The central portion of the grounds was oriented along the axis to exploit the natural beauty of the setting, with views of Mount Rainier, Lake Union, and Lake Washington. Built on 250 acres of largely undeveloped campus of the University of Washington. So 250 acres of largely undeveloped land was all of a sudden transformed into this amazing city fair in like about 3 years. The grounds were centered around the Arctic Circle with its cascading fountain and reflecting pool. The surrounding court of honor, flanked by 2 wings of 3 buildings on either side, descending from the domed government building. These 6 buildings were named after Europe, Asia, Alaska, Hawaii, and industries of manufacturing and agriculture. So it's pretty incredible. Let's see. The direct impact of the fair on the city of Seattle, Alaska, and the region. Oh, so sorry. This is Seattle, Alaska. This is not Seattle, Washington. Let me check that. Double check that. Sorry, I should have known that one. Oh boy. Oh, yes. Okay, so they're getting it. That website's getting it mixed up. The direct impact of the fair on the city of Seattle, Alaska. Oh, Alaska, separate. And the region is not easy to quantify. Most Seattleites today have only a vague impression, if any, of the fair's existence. So, yeah, I never heard about this place until I just looked it up. So, I'm going to link up to this University Libraries, University of Washington. You tell me if it looks temporary to you. That looks like every other Tartarian building all across the plain with the Antiquitech on top. I mean, it doesn't look much different than that. It looks very grand, but technically all the same. Here's another shot of it. All these buildings all popped up within 3 years. I think that's very fishy and highly unlikely. We got all these colonnades. Let's see the best shots here. I mean, this is just one building here out of the 100. Beautiful fountains. Just one that's pretty grand, and then add it all up and you got a lot of work on your hands for 3 years. Okay, so we got, that is some beautiful architecture right there. Agricultural building, Alaska, Yukon, Pacific. So, these architects supposedly just love to build stuff and destroy stuff right after. It's pretty... Look, University of Washington Library. Look how beautifully laid out that is. It looks like Washington, D.C. Wow. Copyright 1908. Wow. That looks like the grand architecture we have all over the United States. Auditorium, Alaska. So this one is still around, the auditorium. That's the thing. So if some of them survived and some didn't, I'm not seeing a huge difference between what's supposedly made out of plaster and what's not. I really am not seeing a big difference. Can you tell the difference? And then that, I'll end on this one. The cascading waterfalls. It's a little blurry, but can you see how grand that is? That's Tartaria. That's masterful. All right. So you can go through this. I'll put a link. So now this is the fountain now. Much less grand. I wanted to quickly take a snapshot look at the Tennessee Centennial Exposition. Now, this is in Nashville, Tennessee. And I wanted to just zoom in and see what I could see here, because this was another fair that was built and then destroyed. And the only remaining building I could see being the Parthenon, which is still in Nashville. Now, what I notice is the extensive wall, a beautiful entranceway. There's a balloon in the background so people could see everything. There's lakes and fountains and just buildings everywhere. Grand buildings that don't look to be temporary. Now, this looks like an illustration, but still. There was the pyramid building that they took down. And then this looks like a grand Capitol building. And then what I noticed about this little building right here is it's got little gondolas connected to this Capitol building here. Interesting. They were transporting people from the top of that level across. And that system was destroyed. I don't know of any gondolas in Nashville, Tennessee now. So this is what we're dealing with. These grand cities that was supposedly built and then destroyed. And then one or two buildings would be kept. And then they tell us the rest were all just destroyed. It's crazy. All right. Thanks for watching, and hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.